Hey, it's Shabes, or Call. Shabes is the original host. He's off doing some other stuff. He has very weak locks, so it wasn't difficult to get into here. But anyway, welcome to Anitube Digest, the show that goes over the best and not so best anime YouTube videos to come out this week. I should probably clarify that I don't do a lot of unscripted long-form podcast stuff like this, so it might get a little bit rambly and might still be a bit shorter than other episodes, so hopefully that won't be a problem. And also, I feel a little bit sick, so that might come out in my voice. I'm gonna give it my best shot either way, but just fair warning in advance. So, that being said, let's start with the ones that were... Starting with this podcast by Yahtzee Khrushchev and Jack Packard from their series Slightly Something Else called How Anime Ruins Everything. And the reason I'm putting this in not good is less that I think that their anime opinions are bad. They seem to have pretty good taste from the stuff that they have seen. It's just that there's basically nothing of value said over this hour-and-a-half long discussion about how anime is supposedly ruining video games. And honestly, I could make some argument that there are elements of anime games that aren't very good, specifically like the exploitative nature of gacha games and other things like spin-off games that come from every popular show that don't really add anything of value either, which I actually got from a video I'm going to be mentioning later on, and so on and so forth. So there is stuff that could be said, it's just none of that comes up here since Yahtzee seems more interested in being antagonistic towards anime fans, and Jack seems to be given the responsibility of trying to rein that in. The biggest example being when Yahtzee was trying to say that anime fans are the new Star Trek fans, at least in the West, but when he started to claim that Star Trek fans tended to be pedophiles when they were older and started making that connection between Star Trek fans and anime fans, Jack seemed to sort of prod him to backtrack that idea a little bit. So that got shut down pretty quickly, but it probably would have been pretty bad if he committed to the bit there, because that's kind of a touchy spot with the anime community. And everything beyond that point was just them saying that they like some anime, but they think the majority are bad. But if you like anime, then continue to like anime because it's fine, I guess. And that's basically it. Yeah, either way, just not a great discussion. They had some anime recommendations given to them and they shot them all down, so... yeah. The next one I'm gonna have in not good is Can Hype Ruin Anime by Scamboli Reviews. And usually I like Scamboli stuff. I kind of assumed that if he uploaded this week, it would be something that I would put in at least decent. The issue with this video is it kind of has another empty sentiment like the other one. And the reason is he's talking about overhype in anime and how if a lot of people are excited about a show that you're disappointed by, you have no obligation to continue engaging with that media or the audience of people that enjoy it. You can criticize it, but there's no reason to get all up in arms and blame overhype or say anything along those lines. The problem is, he makes the argument in comparison to comments that he was getting on his videos asking him to not overhype certain shows. And the issue is, I think this video kind of serves the same function as those comments, just on a noticeably larger scale. Even if this video gets 100,000 views, it's not going to make a major difference in the same way the comments on his video before probably wouldn't have made a difference either. The people who weren't going to be toxic and used their common sense to decide that, hey, I don't like this show, I'm not going to continue watching it, probably didn't need a video like this, and the people that are going to be toxic aren't going to suddenly have their mind changed by this. So either way, it just seemed like not really that good. Just overall, just a bit lackluster. And I don't think this video performs super well compared to his other ones, so I don't think he'd make more videos like this in the future, but, he can do his own thing. It just felt like a bit of a step backwards for him, and hopefully his next video does better. I was really hoping this one would go indecent, to be honest, but yeah, just not great. But that being said, let's move on to the stuff I thought was... And the first one for this section is actually the previous episode of Digest hosted by Ava over on Kor Too. And just to be clear, I feel it goes without saying that she's a way better host for this than I am, just on the basis of actually having a fairly, I would say, extensive knowledge of this kind of thing, because I'm not much of a writer, I'm not much of a video editor. I'm really just covering the bare minimum when it comes to wider names in the anime community sphere, because I'm not really actively looking for niche videos like the ones that they cover in this, because like I barely know who the Canapa effect is. So when they said like, oh, this doesn't feel like a usual Canapa video, I basically had like no point of reference for that. But overall, whenever they gave her critique, I thought, that makes sense. And their voice did a good job of carrying the episode, because usually I'll skip around for these kinds of things, but in this one I just ended up listening to the whole thing just because I enjoyed like hearing them talk while I was working, and because a lot of these I've been listening to in the background while I was doing other things. And also I just really liked the rap segment that they did for the 9-out part. I just wasn't expecting that, and it made the video like 10 times better, in my opinion. So yeah, a pretty solid episode to digest. Moving on. The next one in decent is a video by Sydsnap called Sitting Down with One of Japan's Biggest American Porn Stars. And to be honest, it wasn't one I was expecting to enjoy, because I'm not usually a big fan of Sydsnap stuff. It kind of sounds like she has a delivery where she's on the verge of crying for a lot of them, and that's not really my thing. But I think in these more laid back videos where she's going to like a themed bar or interviewing someone, she has a good energy to it. And in this case, it was a pleasant thing to listen to while I was drawing. I don't think I can really comment too much about like the subject matter of the discussion, because it was basically this actress, I believe her name was June Lovejoy, talking about her experience in the industry to a small degree, but in terms of like an interview that mostly served as a pleasant chat between people that seemed like they were getting along with each other, it was pretty enjoyable to listen to. And moving on from there, I'm going to talk a bit about Mother's Basement's video, What Happened to Wonder Egg Priority. Now I want to be clear, I've seen the first episode of this show, and I've watched this video. That is the majority of the context I have around Wonder Egg Priority, and just from what I've seen of that, and I guess the reactions to the final episode on Twitter, I would say this show is probably not something I would like. I thought the first episode was interesting, but I didn't think it was like a masterpiece, and I didn't think it was really going anywhere. And this video kind of confirmed it for me. And while I do think like the animation and stuff was good, I just don't think like it was going places, I guess. And this video kind of highlighted that. So yeah, he basically went over what he thought was good, what he thought was bad, and then he kind of backtracked towards the end and said that it was still mostly good, even though from what he said in the video, it kind of crashed and burned for the majority of it. But I do agree with his final point that even if it feels like a bit of a backtrack, it still had the potential to be a lot better. And I think if everyone was given more time to really clean up and polish this, it could have been an amazing show. But yeah, I mean, this is about the video, about the show. And the video is decent. He has a good delivery, decent editing, and overall, like, you know, it's 20 minutes, which feels a bit excessive, but the points he's making feel valid for the time that he spends on both establishing what it did well and what it didn't. So it's all right. It's about what I'd expect from his channel, but not bad. Up next is a video by Netflix anime called Translator's Notes, The Way of the House Husband. And I kind of have mixed feelings about this one because it feels over-edited and yet under-delivers on its intended purpose, but in a way that's understandable given the subject matter. Like, they're breaking down the nuances of the dialogue, it's just they're doing so in a way that's a bit boring because they're just like playing out a scene in its entirety, and then they're highlighting the line or phrase that had to be changed in its translation, and then talking about what it means in a proper context, like what it actually means for the Yakuza to say X, and ultimately it makes those scenes funnier in context because it gives a little bit more than what we're given in the translation. It's just, it seems kind of awkward to just have the text at the bottom just silently show the translator's notes. I just feel like they could have formatted it a little bit better so that you don't have to watch the scene in its entirety and then just have there be like this silent or almost silent segment where you have to stop and like actually pause and read the text. I think it could have been paced a little better, but it is a new concept for this channel from the looks of things. I saw some comments saying that this was a new series, so I think the formatting could be changed a little bit to make the pacing a little better, but it does seem like a fun concept and it's something I'd like to see more of from this channel. Kind of felt like there were too many flashy graphics for not enough in terms of actual material being covered, if that makes sense. Also, unrelated, and apparently Netflix has like an anime character like mascot thing. I don't know, I just think it's a cute design and I thought I'd throw that out there. Next one I thought was good was the Nagatoro video game is very cursed by KorewaEden. And I'm going to be honest, this was like one of the channels I was excited to cover because I really like both their editing style and their delivery. It's very fast paced and has this constant energy while also still being like consistently interesting despite the subject matter varying a pretty decent amount between his videos, because sometimes he's just making jokes about like random characters that he was suggested about on Twitter, or he has like a rant about a certain subject he wants to cover, or he has like a show he wants to talk about, or anything. Like, he can make it interesting in all of them. And in this case, he's talking about the Nagatoro video game made by the original creator of the manga Nanashi. And it's just like a really fun video. I like the gag and like the midpoint where he's talking about the fact that because it's in Japanese, you basically have to move to Japan in order to learn Japanese before you can play the game, but apparently there's like an English patch for it. I think he has like I don't feel like there's a lot I can say in terms of describing his editing style, because it's very all over the place and has like, it has a heavy reliance on like memes and GIFs and clips and stuff that are constantly being thrown on screen. I would say it's very hectic, but in a positive way. And yeah, I think this is a good channel. It's actually one I supported on Patreon for a few months back when I could afford that. And I don't regret my decision. I think he made a lot of good videos. And I guess like if I did have to like deviate from like this video, which I think is good, a video from his channel that you should definitely watch is his moe analysis. It's like 17 minutes or something long, but it is incredibly good. It's actually one that I've shown to other people outside of like the anime YouTube sphere because I think it's like a good video. So yeah, I would recommend his channel. Very good stuff. Moving on. Another video that caught my eye this week was a video by Gigguk where he explained the entirety of the Fate franchise in 30 minutes. And technically speaking, he didn't, but in my case, I don't really know anything about the Fate franchise. So since he just started with a breakdown of the timeline, I think that was a pretty solid start. And just to be clear, I don't really like the majority of Gigguk's content, or at least not as much as I used to be, considering this was my entry point into Anitube and a lot of his videos covered subjects in a very broad manner. It's just, I feel like the points he makes in them are more based on trend chasing, and the humor he provides is very derivative and mostly based on the most stereotypical or lowest hanging fruit related jokes that you could possibly make. Like, here, let me just put some screenshots from this video on screen and you'll have a pretty good idea of the quality of the humor that he's bringing to the table. It can get kind of frustrating at times, but at the same time, it does make sense considering like appealing to, and I say this in the most neutral way possible, the lowest common denominator is probably one of the best ways to guarantee consistent success, as unfortunate as that is. And I still think he does, like, make decent content. And in this case, I think the video he made was, while a little bit padded, considering the humor I wasn't a huge fan of and the obvious influence from Nakey Jakey that he explicitly says in the video, I do think I do have a good and solid grasp of what the Fate franchise is at its most basic form, and I think he did a good job of explaining it. Like, his breakdown of the timeline made sense, and even when he included all of the more crazy aspects like the spin-offs and alternate universes that turned the timeline into a jumbled mess, I still felt like the way it was structured, I still understand enough of it that if you asked me to like narrate it, I would probably be able to do so with some accuracy. And I think it did actually get me a little bit interested in the Fate franchise, since it's something that I've always been like vaguely aware of, but I've never really gone too deep into. I tried playing the visual novel and I just got super bored and started clicking way too fast to actually read anything. And then I tried watching the anime, which basically went over all of the events of the part in the light novel that I played, and that got boring too. So maybe there's a point in the series that I'd be able to enter where I'd be able to get into it. And now that I'm more aware of how the timeline functions and some of the more lighthearted spin-offs like the cooking anime where everyone just chills out and eats good food, which is always something I'm down to watch, I think I have a couple opportunities to really go into this and see if it's something I'd enjoy. So in that regard, he did what he set out to do. He got me interested in the franchise. Like, he pulled it off. And yeah, I think I'll try seeing some more of Fate and see if it's something I enjoy. Yeah. Next one for decent was video game Flatwood Monster Sightings by Hazel. And I kind of have mixed feelings about Hazel, but they're all positive feelings. It's just her channel has kind of taken me by surprise, considering how many videos of hers I've seen independently of each other without realizing they were made by the same person. Because when I saw the Flatwoods monster video, I thought, hey, this is kind of cool, I'll throw this in. But then when I went to go subscribe to the channel, I realized she also made the video, a normal manga about a boy and his mom, and a video about Moral Oral that I watched like months ago. And I saw all of these like individually without realizing they were made by the same person, which might say more about me than the channel itself because I didn't notice, but I'd still consider it pleasant overall because I like their style a lot and they have a really good delivery, and I think their editing changed enough between each of these videos to make them unique, which I enjoyed a lot. And with this video in particular, it seemed like a very niche interest that they delivered on in spades, to use a really stupid pun, because they were talking about different instances of this creature called the Flatwoods monster showing up in different video games, which I enjoyed a lot. I really liked the part where they were trying to find a very specific screenshot in multiple different playthroughs of this game and having to spend like hours and hours to find one instance of something that didn't even show up on Google Images. It showed that they put a good amount of work into this, and I like the part where they talked about like their experience on like farms and stuff, because as someone who's like worked on farms, I can relate to a degree. Overall, just really pleasant, and I think like this channel is going to be going places in the future just based on the performance of the normal manga about a boy and his mom video, which is also very good. So yeah, I'd recommend this channel. Seems like it's going places. I'm excited to see it. Oh, so I'm starting to feel like this is getting a little bit repetitive, so to break up the monotony, I'm going to switch things up and talk about a song now, because one of my favorite Hololive EN members, Kiara, recently released another song, and I've been interested in a lot of their other music, and I've listened to it a lot, so I'm curious to see what this new song's like, so I'm going to give it a listen real quick, see what the video's like, and then I'll let you guys know what I think. So right off the bat, I absolutely loved the illustrations by Neon Beat for this video. They also did the illustrations for, I believe her name is Vay, for Vay's design, and I think they're a really talented artist, and I'm really glad their work was used here because I think it's really solid. In terms of the graphics around it, it has this very interesting style where the different framings of the graphics behind them can change depending on what's overlaid, because sometimes it'll be black and white, sometimes it'll be pixelated, sometimes there'll be this sort of blur around everything that makes it look like it's glowing, and it's constantly changing. The text moves in different ways. They're all really interesting editing techniques that would feel chaotic if done incorrectly, but I think there is a solid balance and some really interesting tricks that I think really bring the video together. So visually, I like it a lot. As far as the actual song goes, it feels a bit like a slightly altered version of Fireworks, at least in its ganbatte. You can do it. You can do whatever you want. Follow your dreams, the world is your oyster idea that is very prevalent in those kinds of songs that, I mean, I'm not a huge fan of, but the actual like track around it and the instrumental I thought was really interesting. I especially like the parts that bring out the sort of marching band drum type beat and, areas that are like right before the chorus and some like areas towards the middle that I think are really interesting sounding. So yeah, I mean, I'm not a huge fan of lyrics, but this is something I listen to. And again, I really like the editing for the graphics in this video. I'm not 100% sure how they do it, but it's something I've wanted to do for like animation memes and stuff. So if I figure out how, you're definitely going to see me trying it. I just got to figure out how, because that was pretty cool. Well, we finally found one I could talk about in depth, because this is something I actually know a decent bit about. I was trying to find like something specific as far as art channels go to cover here, because there's lots of art channels on YouTube, and I feel like it'd be weird to pick one at random. So I picked one at random. This is the Naoki Saito illustration channel, and his most recent video, Illustration Correction 63, Professionals Will Explain, where this professional artist goes through and takes a piece of submitted work and basically changes little bits of it one by one to correct it into something that he finds better in his own style. And I like that he chooses to paint over the original illustration rather than just moving it off to the side and redrawing it again from scratch, because that gives him a lot of opportunities to explain his process in more detail. Because the way the original illustration looked, it was a very rough chibi style, and he wanted something that looked slightly more realistic. And the guy hosting the video decided to take it in a direction of shaping everything to be more three-dimensional. So he would start with the chin and sort of turn it into a more defined chin shape rather than the sort of flatter chibi style that was there before. And then he corrected the eyes to match the shape of the chin, and then he adjusted the mouth to match the shape of the chin in comparison with the eyes so that everything's in proportion. Then he adjusted the neck, then he adjusted the hoodie to match the perspective of the other features of the face, and then he adjusted the hair and the horns, and then he painted over all of that and cleaned it up. So by the end of it, it didn't necessarily look like a different character despite being radically changed throughout the correction process. And I think this is a great way to do critique, because at each step it's something that can be easily replicated, and even if the end is radically different, you understand how he reached that point and you understand the intentions behind each of the steps, because he was also very clear in explaining why and how he was making the decisions he was in order to get the 3D effect that he was going for. Because all he was doing was moving from a flat chibi style to a more defined, rounder, three-dimensional style, and just adding his own personal flair to it, since the person who was asking for the critique didn't really ask for anything in particular. He was just like, could you please make this look better? And as someone who still feels like they have a lot to learn about creating illustrations, this seems like a great resource to learn from, so it's definitely something I'm going to be spending time looking into. And lastly, the guy was just really nice about it. He started the video by talking about how submitting work like this to a bigger art channel like this probably takes a lot of courage, because there's always the paranoia that the people you send it to could be mean about it, or you could end up being ridiculed by other people who see the video, considering from what he could tell, the person who submitted it was probably very young. So he praised them for sending it at all, which I think is an admirable way of handling it. The video also just had a pleasant vibe to it, so if you're looking for art videos and you're interested in something like this, I'd check it out. Veering even further away from the intended subject matter, Toniko Pantoja made a video called What Only Seeking Validation and Approval Did to Me, which is his thoughts on how creating work specifically for the validation that you get from others can be a toxic and ultimately unhealthy way of looking at producing art. And he talks about his experience making different short films that he wanted to be impressive and gain the popularity and notoriety that he was looking for, and how that would sometimes lead to ambitious projects that he wasn't able to complete. And I kind of feel that, because that's kind of my thought process for a lot of the work I make, is less that I'm trying to make something specifically for me, but usually I'm trying to make things for other people and have it be impressive. It's part of the reason I make so much gift art for other artists and other creators that I like, or through collaborations or do stuff like that. I would say it's less altruistic and more that it gives me incentive to improve because of that validation, and also I consider it kind of a social outlet for me, since it's easier than talking and stuff. I don't know if that makes any sense, but anyway, I felt the sentiment that he was bringing across here a lot, and I kind of have mixed feelings about it. that go a lot deeper than that, but considering this is just a discussion of different YouTube videos, I probably won't go that far. Might be a bit too personal. As far as his editing style goes, he just ends up going through all of his old like animation reels and shows whatever like footage that he made that's relevant to what he's talking about or is semi-relevant, and it makes the videos really interesting to watch because it's kind of a long ramble, but with all of these interesting, like impressive, like art segments that he's made over the years that highlight all of his abilities, which I thought was super cool. So yeah, I'll probably make my own video about how I feel the search for validation and how that affects like your career online, if you even want to have a career online, and how it changes over time, because I have a lot of thoughts about it and I don't really want to place them here. So I'm just going to say this was a good video. I agree with a lot of the points he made, and I'm just going to move on. Oh, another big thing that happened this week was the newest debut of another member of HoloLiveEN, this one being IRyS, who it claims to be a Nephilim, but if you do like a simple Google search, you'll know that a Nephilim is like this very strong giant character in the Bible, and not like a mix of angels and demons, which is a bit of a stretch on their part, but you know, I'll let that slide. I'm not a huge religious scholar, so I'm not going to be super adamant in fact checking them, because more importantly, their singing is amazing. Like, I know that the focus for a lot of other streamers tends to be more focused on gaming and stuff like that. In the case of Mori Calliope, it was her rapping, and you know, obviously there is music being released by the other streamers like Kiara and I believe recently Gura, but in this case I think this is going to be someone who is primarily singing for their streams, which I think is really interesting, and I'm excited to see what they do for their streams. The only issue I have is I'm not a huge fan of her face, and I feel like that's really mean to say, but I mean, the artist did like an excellent job of designing them. I just think like the model, the graphics look a little bit flat on her face, especially with how defined the nose is. It just kind of feels like they're kind of stickers on her face. Like it could have been defined a little bit more, because I think it's a live 2D model and not like a 3D one. So I don't think it quite matches, but that is a very nitpicky complaint, because overall, this seems like a nice design, and I'm excited to see what the newer members of HoloLiveEN are going to be like if this is what we're getting now. I'm definitely down to see more of her streams. So I just remembered this video has to be an hour long, and I've already gone through the majority of videos I had lined up for this. So since I kind of want to pad for time here for a little bit before I get to the best of the week, I'm just going to type anime into the search on TikTok and just talk about whatever shows up. First one.
You are Mama.
Yeah, as long as you're daddy. Ash's mom is like, is it pronounced Entei or enter me? Because I'm good with both.
This was a bad idea. I wonder if any good reaction content came out this week. What?
Oh, please. Oh my God. What? Oh. Oh my God. Daddy.
Are they done already? Don't tell me they're done already.
You're not going. Oh my God.
Get rusted.
Okay, but for real, Jack and Kor over on Spilling the Milk made a video reacting to Hige Hero, and they made it into a drinking game, and I think they just have a good dynamic with these kinds of videos. The editing is always solid and has lots of funny gags in it. I just think it was good. It was funny. I don't really want to break down too many of the jokes, but you know, it was good. I liked it. Yeah. Okay, got a few more honorable mentions here. The first one being What Anime Looks Like in My Head by Kenny Lauderdale. A little stupid, but I thought it was funny. Next one being Cup of Noodle Sausage by Ordinary Sausage. Again, very stupid, but I think barely qualifies in the loosest and least justifiable way. but still pretty funny. Next is an episode of Manben with Shiba Tetsuya, and for those unaware, Manben is the show where the author of Monster goes through and interviews other mangaka while they get their drawing and a creation process filmed over a couple days, and they'll sort of rewatch the footage and discuss that process together. It is fascinating to watch. But the problem is it's just a re-upload on someone's YouTube and not an actual series on YouTube, so it doesn't actually count. And the last one to not make the cut, and only because of a time constraint, is a video called I Do What I Want by a channel I believe is pronounced IRyS. It's spelled NEYTIRIX, and it's just this video in this really unique animation style of this person building this scale model of a ship from One Piece, and then building an entire diorama around that updated model, which they painted over and then added in clay and reformatted it, add actual cloth sails. They built this entire set around it to match the way they updated the look of the ship, including this sea made out of resin with really detailed sea foam. It is just super cool. But the problem is it was uploaded on the 5th and it was not within my time period to cover and must be stricken from the record. Unfortunate, but it must be done. And with those out of the way, time to announce the... And that video was a manga where no one can live by hiding in public. And the reason this one sticks out to me so much is because it's about a manga that I'm going to work on the assumption that barely anybody knows about, just based at least on how there isn't even an official MAL entry, and it's almost impossible to find anything close to a physical copy online. But the story and the artwork was just genuinely beautiful to me. I've always been really interested in manga that are kind of out there in terms of what they do with their style, and this is one that stands out almost immediately. And the way that they presented it was just as engaging. Towards the start, you see the editing choices that they've made and the sound effects that they choose. When they go over this crowd of people, you hear the screams and cries of them as they're running away. They have similar effects on the text and also a very distinct choice of music that I think really builds on the tone they're trying to get across. I mean, I could go on, but I'd prefer if you watch the video yourself because it is very well put together. And it's all in service of a manga that you could read in half an hour, so I'd hate to give away more information than I have to. I feel like this summary was pretty brief compared to the others, but I think it's just pretty self-evident why this got best of the week, so I don't really see the need to say more. It's pretty obvious. And hiding, if you see this, I'm really sorry I laughed at one of the titles that you were thinking for this video. That was incredibly rude of me. I'm sorry about that. And with all of that out of the way, this concludes my one and only addition to Anitube Digest. I barely got this over the 30-minute mark, and most of these are supposed to be an hour. This is literally as much as I felt like I could say about this week at Anitube. I know the Anime Man released this video that's a giant Japan quiz with a bunch of big YouTubers, but honestly, that didn't really seem like my kind of thing. I didn't really care that much, so I didn't include it, and I guess it's the best I could probably get. So I would recommend checking out every video I mentioned, even the ones that I said weren't good. Form your own opinions, obviously. And next week's episode is going to be hosted by Ember, so be on the lookout for that. And yeah, I guess that's it. See ya.